My name is Dr. Sarah Chin, and I want to tell you about the day I silenced my family's cruel laughter forever. But first, let me explain how a board-certified neurosurgeon ended up washing dishes in a restaurant kitchen, and why my own family thought I was a failure. It all started 3 years ago when I moved back to my hometown after completing my surgical residency at Johns Hopkins. I had just finished one of the most grueling periods of my life, 7 years of medical training followed by a 6-year neurosurgery residency. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and desperately needed a break before starting my career as an attending physician. But here's what my family didn't know. I had been offered a position at the city's premier medical center, but I had asked to delay my start date by 6 months. After 13 years of nonstop studying and training, I wanted some time to decompress and figure out who I was outside of medicine. The restaurant job was supposed to be temporary, a way to stay busy while earning a little money and avoiding questions about my future. The problem was I couldn't tell my family the truth. My parents had always been obsessed with appearances and success. They bragged constantly about my older brother Marcus, who worked in finance, and my younger sister Jenny, who was a marketing director. When I took the dishwashing job at Romano's Italian kitchen, I simply told them I was taking a break to figure things out. I thought they would understand and support me during this transitional period. I was completely wrong. Sarah's always been the disappointment of the family, my mother would whisper to her friends during her weekly bridge games. I know because my neighbor Mrs. Patterson told me. All those years in school, and for what? She's washing dishes like a teenager. It's embarrassing. My father was even worse. During family dinners, he would make passive-aggressive comments about some people not living up to their potential and wasting expensive educations. When relatives asked about me, my parents would quickly change the subject or make vague references to me still figuring things out. The worst part was family gatherings. Every holiday, every birthday party, every celebration became an opportunity for my extended family to mock my life choices. My cousin David, who worked as a sales manager, would pat me on the head condescendingly and ask, "Still playing in the kitchen, Zarbear?" My Aunt Linda would make loud comments about how some people are meant for greatness and others are meant to serve. At my brother's engagement party, the mockery reached a new level. I had just finished a particularly busy shift at the restaurant and arrived still smelling faintly of kitchen grease. I had tried to clean up, but anyone who's worked in food service knows that smell clings to everything. "Oh my God, Sarah," my sister Jenny announced loudly as I walked into the country club. "You literally smell like a deep fryer. Could you not have showered before coming to Marcus's engagement party?" The entire room turned to look at me. 43 members of my extended family, my brother's future in-laws, and family friends all stared as Jenny continued her performance. "Seriously, everyone, this is my sister Sarah. She washes dishes for minimum wage at some Italian place downtown. Can you believe it? After all that schooling." She laughed like it was the funniest joke in the world. My cousin Rebecca chimed in, "I heard she drops off dirty plates to fancy restaurants now. How the mighty have fallen." The laughter that followed felt like knives in my chest. But the final blow came from my own mother. Standing in the middle of the elegant country club dining room, surrounded by people I had known my entire life, she looked directly at me and said, "Sarah has always been our little underachiever. We keep hoping she'll find her way, but some people just aren't meant for success. At least she has a job, even if it's embarrassing the family name." The room went silent for a moment, then erupted in uncomfortable laughter. I stood there, surrounded by people who were supposed to love and support me, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. These were the same people who used to brag about my academic achievements, who had attended my medical school graduation, who had once been proud to call me family. That night, I went home to my small apartment and cried harder than I had since my first year of medical school. I looked at my diploma hanging on the wall, my MD from Johns Hopkins, my neurosurgery residency certificate, my board certification documents. I thought about the lives I had saved during my residency, the families I had helped, the complex brain surgeries I had performed successfully. But what hurt most was the realization that my own family couldn't see past a temporary job to recognize who I really was. They had reduced me to nothing more than the family failure based on 6 months of washing dishes. I had been planning to tell them the truth gradually, maybe when I started my position at the medical center. But after that night, I decided they deserved something more dramatic. If they wanted to judge me based on appearances, I would give them an appearance they would never forget. The opportunity came 3 weeks later at my grandmother's 85th birthday party. It was being held at my parents' house, and as usual, the entire extended family would be there. My mother had specifically asked me to try to look presentable and maybe not mention the dishwashing thing to my grandmother's friends. I had a plan. That morning, I went to the medical center where I would soon be working and picked up my official hospital identification badge, my surgical scrubs, and my personalized white coat, the one embroidered with Dr. Sarah Chen, MD, Neurosurgery Department, Chief Resident. I also brought along my board certification documents and my offer letter for the attending physician position. The party was in full swing when I arrived. I could hear the familiar sound of my family's voices through the front door, the same voices that had spent months mocking me, judging me, and treating me like a disappointment. I took a deep breath, straightened my white coat, and walked inside. The reaction was immediate and stunning. My cousin David, who was in the middle of telling someone about his successful sales numbers, stopped mid-sentence and stared. My sister Jenny, who had been laughing about something with her friends, went completely silent. My mother, who had been showing off family photos to my grandmother's friends, looked up and her face went pale. "Sarah," my father said, his voice barely a whisper. What are you wearing?" I smiled calmly and walked into the center of the room. Every conversation had stopped. Every eye was on me and my pristine white coat. "Hello, everyone," I said in the confident voice I had developed during my years of medical training. "I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I was at the hospital finalizing some paperwork for my new position." The silence was deafening. My Aunt Linda, who had spent months making snide comments about my serving career, was the first to find her voice. "Sarah, what exactly is going on here?" "Well," I said, reaching into my coat pocket and pulling out my hospital badge, "I guess it's time you all knew the truth. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm a board-certified neurosurgeon, and I'll be starting as an attending physician at Metropolitan Medical Center next month." I held up my badge for everyone to see. The photo showed me in surgical scrubs, and the title was clearly visible: Dr. Sarah Chen, MD, Neurosurgery Department. But you wash dishes," my cousin Rebecca stammered. "You work at that restaurant." I took a temporary job at Romano's because I wanted 6 months to decompress after completing 13 years of medical training, I explained calmly. "I just finished a neurosurgery residency at Johns Hopkins. You know, that little medical school you might have heard of." I pulled out my offer letter and held it up. "This is my contract for an attending position starting at $450,000 per year, with the potential to earn significantly more through private practice. I'll be performing brain surgery, treating patients with neurological disorders, and conducting medical research." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "The reason I've been washing dishes," I continued, looking directly at my mother, "is because I've spent the last 13 years of my life studying and training nonstop. I haven't had a real break since I was 18 years old. I wanted a few months to remember who I am outside of medicine before starting one of the most demanding careers in the world." My sister Jenny was staring at me with her mouth open. "But why didn't you tell us?" "Because," I said, my voice growing stronger, "I thought my family would support me no matter what job I had temporarily. I thought the people who raised me would trust that I knew what I was doing with my life. I thought you would give me the benefit of the doubt instead of mocking me and treating me like a failure." I looked around the room at all the faces, the same faces that had laughed at me, judged me, and made me feel worthless for months. "Instead, you spent months telling everyone I was an embarrassment. You made jokes about my minimum wage job. You treated me like I was stupid, lazy, and unsuccessful. You reduced my entire worth as a person to a temporary dishwashing position." My mother stepped forward, her face red with embarrassment. "Sarah, sweetheart, we didn't know. That's exactly the point, Mom," I interrupted. "You didn't know, but you judged anyway. You assumed the worst about your own daughter. You were so concerned about what other people would think that you never once asked me if there was more to the story." I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. This is Dr. Martinez, the department head at Metropolitan Medical. He's been calling me all week about a particularly complex surgery he wants me to consult on. Apparently, they specifically requested me because of my expertise in pediatric brain tumor removal. My father, who had spent months making passive-aggressive comments about my wasted education, looked like he was going to be sick. Sarah, we had no idea. Did you know, I continued, that during my residency, I published 3 research papers in the Journal of Neurosurgery? Did you know that I was nominated for the Outstanding Resident Award at Johns Hopkins? Did you know that I've already been invited to speak at 2 medical conferences next year? The answer was obvious. They knew none of it because they had never bothered to ask. But more importantly, I said, my voice now carrying the authority I had earned through years of medical training. Did you know that your embarrassing dishwasher daughter has saved 17 lives in the past 2 years? 17 people are alive today because of surgeries I performed. 17 families got to keep their loved ones because of the skills I spent 13 years developing. My grandmother, who had been silent through this entire revelation, slowly walked over to me. At 85 years old, she was still sharp as a tack, and I could see the pride beginning to shine in her eyes. Dr. Chin, she said formally, then broke into a huge smile. I always knew you were special, sweetheart. I just didn't know you were this special. The dam broke. Suddenly everyone was talking at once, apologizing, making excuses, trying to backtrack months of cruel comments and judgmental behavior. But I held up my hand for silence. I want you all to understand something, I said. This experience has taught me who my real family is. Real family supports each other through difficult times. Real family asks questions before making judgments. Real family doesn't mock each other for sport. I looked specifically at my cousin David, who had called me Sarbear so condescendingly. David, you make $60,000 a year selling insurance. I'll be making more than 7 times that amount saving people's lives. But I never once made you feel small about your career because I was raised to believe that all honest work has dignity. Then I turned to my sister. Jenny, you spent months telling people I was a failure. You made jokes about my minimum wage job at family gatherings. You encouraged other people to mock me. That says a lot more about your character than it does about mine. Finally, I addressed my parents. Mom, Dad, you raised me to work hard, be kind to others, and never give up on my dreams. I did exactly that. I worked harder than most people can imagine to become a neurosurgeon. But when I needed your support for a few months, you failed me completely. My mother was crying now. Sarah, please, we're so sorry. We're so proud of you. We just didn't understand. The thing is, I said gently, I still would have been the same person even if I really was just a dishwasher. My worth as a human being doesn't come from my job title or my salary. It comes from how I treat other people, how hard I work, and what kind of person I choose to be every day. The room was completely silent again, but this time it was a thoughtful, ashamed silence instead of a mocking one. I forgive all of you, I continued, because you're my family and I love you. But I need you to understand that respect isn't something you can turn on and off based on someone's job title. Either you respect me as a person or you don't. My career achievements are just a bonus. Over the next few hours, the atmosphere in the house completely changed. Family members who had spent months avoiding me or making jokes at my expense suddenly wanted to hear about my medical training, my residency experiences, and my plans for the future. People who had treated me like an embarrassment were now bragging to their friends about having a neurosurgeon in the family. But the most meaningful conversation was with my grandmother. Later that evening, when most of the other guests had left, she pulled me aside and said, Sarah, I want you to know that I was proud of you when you were washing dishes, and I'm proud of you now that I know you're a doctor. But I'm most proud that you handled this situation with such grace and dignity. Thank you, Grandma, I said, hugging her tightly. Your grandfather would have been so proud, she continued. He always said that character is what you do when nobody's watching, and class is how you treat people who can't do anything for you. You've shown both tonight. The aftermath of that evening was swift and dramatic. Word spread quickly through our extended family and social circle that the family disappointment was actually a highly skilled neurosurgeon. People who had made cruel jokes suddenly wanted to apologize and reconnect. Family members started asking me for medical advice and bragging about me to their friends. My parents, to their credit, made genuine efforts to make amends. They wrote me a long letter apologizing for their behavior and explaining that they had been so focused on appearances and what other people thought that they had lost sight of what really mattered. They asked for my forgiveness and promised to do better in the future. My sister Jenny took longer to come around, but eventually she admitted that her mockery had come from a place of insecurity. She had always felt like she had to compete with me academically, and when she thought I had failed, it made her feel better about her own life choices. She realized how toxic that mindset was and committed to working on herself. My brother Marcus, who had stayed mostly silent during the months of family mockery, apologized for not defending me. He admitted that he had been so focused on his own career success that he hadn't paid attention to how badly I was being treated. He promised to be a better brother going forward. But perhaps the most satisfying change was in my cousin David and Aunt Linda, who had been the most vocal in their mockery. They both went out of their way to apologize and tried desperately to get back in my good graces. David even asked if I could help him get better health insurance through my medical connections, apparently forgetting that he had spent months treating me like I was beneath him. I started my position at Metropolitan Medical Center the following month, and it was everything I had hoped it would be. The work was challenging and rewarding, my colleagues were brilliant and supportive, and I was finally able to use all the skills I had spent 13 years developing. My first major surgery was removing a brain tumor from a 6-year-old girl, and when her parents hugged me afterward with tears in their eyes, I remembered why I had chosen this career path in the first place. Romano's Italian Kitchen threw me a goodbye party on my last day, and the entire staff signed a card wishing me well in my medical career. They had never made me feel embarrassed about my education or ambitions. They had simply accepted me as a hardworking colleague who did her job well. It was a stark contrast to how my own family had treated me. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at my medical school's graduation ceremony. As I stood at the podium looking out at the new doctors beginning their careers, I thought about the importance of the journey between finishing training and starting practice. I shared my story about taking time to decompress and rediscover myself outside of medicine, and I encouraged them to remember that their worth as human beings wasn't determined by their job titles. Sometimes the people closest to us will judge us based on appearances rather than character, I told them. Sometimes they'll reduce us to our current circumstances rather than recognizing our potential. But never let other people's limitations define your worth. Trust your own journey, even when others don't understand it. The speech was well received, and several students approached me afterward to share their own stories about family pressure and judgment. I realized that my experience, while painful, had given me valuable perspective that I could share with others facing similar challenges. Today, my relationship with my family is stronger than it was before this whole ordeal, but it's different too. They're proud of my achievements now, but I've made it clear that their pride can't be conditional on my professional success. I'm the same person I was when I was washing dishes, and I expect to be treated with the same respect regardless of my job title. My mother has become one of my biggest advocates, often telling the story of my career journey to her friends, though she focuses more on my resilience and determination than on her own role in the drama. My father regularly asks about my work and has become genuinely interested in learning about neurosurgery. My siblings and I have grown closer, united by the understanding that family support shouldn't depend on external validation. The experience taught me several important lessons about human nature and family dynamics. First, people often project their own insecurities onto others, especially when they feel threatened or confused. My family's mockery said more about their fears and limitations than it did about my worth. Second, true character is revealed not in how people treat those they perceive as successful, but in how they treat those they perceive as struggling. Most importantly, I learned that self-worth must come from within. If I had based my sense of value on my family's temporary opinion of me, I would have been devastated. But because I knew who I was and what I had accomplished, their judgment couldn't destroy my confidence. It could only hurt my feelings. The white coat revelation wasn't just about proving my family wrong or getting revenge for their cruel treatment. It was about reclaiming my narrative and demanding the respect I had always deserved. It was about showing them that assumptions are dangerous and that judging people based on limited information says more about the judge than the judged. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for those difficult months. They taught me who my real supporters are, they strengthened my character, and they gave me a story that continues to inspire others facing similar challenges. They also reminded me never to judge others based on their current circumstances, because everyone has a story that's more complex than it appears on the surface. I still keep my white coat hanging in my office, not as a trophy of professional achievement, but as a reminder of the day I stood up for myself and demanded better treatment from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. It reminds me that respect isn't earned through job titles or salaries, it's earned through character, integrity, and how we treat other people. And whenever I put on that white coat to perform surgery, I remember that I'm not just Dr. Sarah Chen, neurosurgeon. I'm also the same person who washed dishes with dignity, who took time to rediscover herself, and who had the courage to stand up to family mockery and demand better. All of those experiences made me who I am today, and I'm proud of every part of my journey. The moral of my story is simple but important. Never judge someone's worth based on their current circumstances, because you never know what they've overcome to get where they are or where they're headed next. And if you find yourself being judged unfairly, remember that other people's opinions of you are not facts about you. They're reflections of their own limitations and biases. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming so successful and confident that the opinions of small-minded people simply don't matter anymore. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up as your authentic self and let your truth speak for itself. That's exactly what I did the day I walked into my grandmother's birthday party wearing my surgeon's coat. And it changed everything.